Guys, we are so honored to have the wonderful composer Garry Schyman here with us today. You guys probably know him from his work with Bioshock, and I know him from Dante's Inferno. We also got Shadow of Mordor, Shadow of War, all great games, all wonderful music. Garry, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Adam. Thanks
Okay,
for inviting me on.
I appreciate you being here. Now we've got a few questions for you. We're ready to jump in. You ready?
I'm ready. Go for it.
Okay. When composing for video games, do they show you storyboards, early animations? What do you build your music around? Do you kind of wait until the product is more in the complete stages before you start putting your job into it?
Well, it depends, and it can vary based upon the project. So it's you start when they want you to start, and they're ready for you to start music from their perspective. The developer, that's the developer, obviously. So yeah, often the first thing you see is artwork. That's like almost typically the first thing you'll see, or any gameplay that they're able to share with you. The gameplay dependent upon how advanced the game is, so that they have something they can actually show you. Usually there's something that's working, and they've got a build. A build is a working version of the game, and someone at the studio. Almost always, I live in Los Angeles, but almost always I'm working with folks that are in all over the world. And this was Luminous Games, which is part of Square Enix, and they're in Tokyo. So I'm working with folks all over the world, and almost rarely in Los Angeles. And of course, this was during COVID when we first started. So they're sharing with you whatever they have, a script, because this is a very story oriented game. Forspoken, it has a really interesting and emotional story associated with it. So that is something they share with you. And then, whatever they have to inspire you, when they want you to write something, usually they will provide gameplay capture. Someone will play the game in the studio, because they most of the time, not always, but most of the time, they don't want to let the game, a working version of the game, out of the studio.
Mm-hmm.
So because they're afraid I'm going to share it online, which I'm not. But in any event, and you sign non-disclosure agreements. But in any event, somebody plays the game at the studio, and they send the gameplay, and then they'll give you some input about what's going on there, what the music should represent, how the music should feel. The hardest part is at the beginning, when you're developing the style, etc., and you have to come up with themes that work. But once you've done that, then it becomes like, okay, next, here's this cue, write this. Yeah, we like that. Next, and but the first things you get is artwork and any gameplay opportunities that exist. And then sometimes they've actually taken the time to develop some, CGI video, because they're doing some kind of promo or whatever. But it varies quite a bit from game to game.
That's wonderful. And a great answer. And Forspoken is why we're talking to you today. It's your latest thing you got going on. And something that I noticed, you really know how to push a player forward using music. Whether it be with the violin runs you've got, the percussion builds, horn blares, there's something special about a song that can make a player want to completely forego the pretense of dilly-dallying and make them want to push forward with the story and like move them forward in the situation. And with a name like Unwavering Resolve, which is from the Forspoken OST, I should have expected that kind of situation. Is there a change in mindset when you're thinking that your music not only has to fit the story, but has to make the player connect and move forward? The music kind of pushing them that way.
Yes, of course. That's the assignment. You're given some gameplay footage, and then you have a discussion about what's going on, what the player is going to be experiencing, what the main character Frey, of course, is almost always there, and what she's experiencing. The shock from going from New York City to this world of Athia, which is this fantasy world, which is like amazing and scary all the same. So yeah, so you're just taking all that into mind, and you're going, okay, let's write some music. It's always intimidating when you first start a queue. But you have opportunities if they don't like it, or if it's not working, that they test the music in game. So that usually there's some kind of a build. A build is a working version of a game in progress. Okay, so they have a build, and you'll write some music, and they may go, this sounds really good, but we'll drop it into the game and see, and they'll test it, and it's like, yeah, that's wonderful, or yeah, it's not quite driving enough. So you get that feedback in a film. If you're scrolling film or television, the feedback is the footage you have, but it's not quite the same as a game footage. Well, to some extent, look, you may write a piece of music that fits a scene in a film, but it also has to fit in a arching storyline, so it is not in isolation. But of course, the same thing is true of gameplay music. There are many. There's like, I think, nearly an hour of cutscenes and cinematics that I scored. So there's also a lot of that as well. But of course, the majority of music I wrote is gameplay music. And you're trying stuff, you're experimenting. Once you sort of grasp the style that they're really loving and that I'm feeling really good about, then it goes smoothly. And it went pretty smoothly, I have to say, which is lucky for me, because there was 2.5 hours of music that I wrote. So I mean, if I was struggling with every cue and getting lots of stuff sent back, like, oh, can you redo this? That would be particularly painful. But it didn't. It went really well. Once the style was established, it went beautifully well. Actually, it was really a pleasure to work on, and the game was inspirational. The game was cool. It's like it went, that means a lot, to have something that inspires you.
That's very exciting. I've not played the game yet, sadly, but I'm hearing some good things about it, and it looked fantastic when we saw the trailers for it. So I'm very excited, and the music has just gotten me so much more excited to play this game. Taking a step back and revisiting some of your greatest hits, I guess. This is actually a question from our lead editor, David. He said, the main title and Cohen's masterpiece from Bioshock 1 are two of my favorite video game pieces, and that's of all time for him. That's not just like, video game music. That's all time for him. His question is, they're both very different. Can you explain the inspiration behind these two unique compositions at all for us?
So the main title for Bioshock, and then Cohen's masterpiece, what they call it. I didn't call it that.
Oh, okay.
That they called it that. And by the way, that just a little aside for anybody listening who's not familiar with game music. Very often, the track names that you end up with that gets as part of the soundtrack was not anything you had any idea was when you were writing the music.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
It's very often, you just have no clue, because that's somebody in PR at the company is going to go, let's name it this. It may have actually quite a technical name, like, Ray, at the, whatever the level and what Ray's doing, and it, which is functionally useful when they're dropping it into the game, but it's not particularly interesting from so I did not write the cue and call it Cohen's masterpiece. All right, so they were very different. They were functioning very differently in Bioshock. The theme, of course, is what you hear usually in the startup music, or when you're in sort of hold mode, and maybe in the end credits or whatever, and that was thematic, and that music, I used the theme throughout the game. Cohen's masterpiece was very specific. When you enter the level of the game, where Sandra Cohen is sort of the predominant boss. He's the boss of that level, where it's like the entertainment part of Rapture, where they have theaters and whatever. And so he's like the creative master, psychopath of that level, and he's the boss, and so the direction was you enter this world and you go into a theater and you hear some music, and it's Sandra Cohen is sitting like in a theater by himself, and then on stage there's a pianist and he's playing some of Cohen's music, and he's like going faster. He's like, he's being a critic of the pianist, and the pianist is chained to the piano. So he's stuck there. He has to and eventually Sandra Cohen is so unhappy with the performance that he blows him up. Which, some composers fantasize about blowing up pianists or not, playing your music properly. In any event, that was what they needed this music for. And that's what I remember. It was like I did one cue, solo piano cue, and they weren't that happy with it. And then I go, then I got it. And the idea was, in my mind, as a person who has studied classical music quite extensively and played the piano my whole life, maybe Sandra Cohen is sort of like Sergei Rachmaninoff, if anybody's familiar with classical music. Rachmaninoff was writing like romantic music well into the 20th century when the styles had changed. He was still sort of harking back to the old style. So what if I wrote something kind of, this is 1960 when the game takes place. What if I was like thinking he was like Rachmaninoff-ish and kind of writing this sort of romantic classical music, So that was sort of like, and they loved that. And then they loved it so much that they ended up using it as background during much of your travails or travels through that level. So that's how that music was unique, and it was meant to be this very specific, what we would call in film music, source music. In other words, the source music is music that's actually occurring in the world. Scoring is music like if you hear orchestral score in Star Wars by John Williams, and where there's no orchestra in space, as we might know, but so that's just coming from the ether and it's creating mood, etc. But source music is something that's actually you see on screen, whether it's in the game or in a film. So this was source music. Then they really loved enough to use it as score as well. So hopefully that explains how they both got there.
That's such a cool thing, and the fact that you remember specifically what it is just very impressive to me. That it's been a while since that game came out, and it was almost like you were right there yesterday, and I would telling me a story about it. So getting back to Forspoken, from the sample that we got of the original soundtrack, because they changed the names of it, you may not recognize it, but Vagabond.
Actually, Vagabond was the name we used. So you chose one of the few.
I chose one of the few, but it happens to be my favorite so far. The intricate cello runs at the very end, and the wonderful vocals pushing it, the song all the way to the end, captured my imagination, and honestly just kept me leaning forward in my chair. I was using it to my morning routine. I was playing this music, trying to see what I really liked about it. But what was if you're allowed to tell us, what was your favorite song that you wrote for the album so far?
Oh gosh, favorite. I don't know if I have a favorite.
It's hard. It's like choosing, which of your children is the favorite.
Which is your favorite children? I can do that though. I only have one child, so I have a son, so I can't actually do that. But if I had more than one, I wouldn't want to do that. So no, I don't necessarily. Obviously, I'll tell you the cues that I chose were some of the ones that I just thought were very evocative, and Vagabond does have this really lovely solo by India Carney, who's the singer who just really sort of kind of represents Frey in a sense, and she did this lovely performance, which we recorded here in Los Angeles. She lives here in LA, and so that was wonderful to bring her in. I had already recorded the orchestra and the choir, and then we brought her in just to do her solos over this pre-recorded tracks so that she could be inspired by it too.
Mhm.
And I'd written out parts for her, and then gave her opportunities to improvise. I can't remember whether Vagabond has any improvs on it. Some of the cues do, where she improvised. Some of them don't, that she sang on. So I'd have to listen to that track again to remind myself. But she was amazing. So I love recording. The writing part is the hard part. I don't. I look. I love when you are writing music. It's hard work, and it's inspiring when you come up with something. When you're looking at that blank page or the blank software that you're writing the music in, that can be a struggle. And like but once you've written the music and everybody's on board and happy, we do mock-ups of the music. We call them music cues, by the way, because the songs would be something well, I guess you could say they're a song because they have vocals, but we generally call them music cues in the business. So once they're all on board and everybody's happy with it, now it's just like, how do we make it sound even better? I have these mock-ups and samples that are really great these days, but an orchestra is like awesome, and they're expensive, but we had the budget to record. I recorded a week with the orchestra, which was so cool to have that much time, because there's 2.5 hours of music, so we needed the time to pull it off. And then the choir was recorded here in Los Angeles, and then of course bringing in India to do solos in a smaller studio was just that's
her
all.
voice is magnificent.
Yeah, that's the fun part. That is the fun part, when you're just recording with live instruments. The hard work is done. Now it's just a matter of I enjoy conducting. That's really great, to conduct an orchestra, playing your music, and you hear it and you go, wow, this is sounding, who wrote this? This sounds really good. Well, it was me. There are composers that hire people to write music. Sometimes you'll see a name associated with it who had very little to do with the actual music that was written. But someone once said to me, an engineer that I work with, that the difference between film music and game music is that game composers actually write their own music, which is a little bit of a cut. That's not all. In no way is that true of all film scores. There's many film scores. But I was just talking to one of my former students, and he had written half of the score, and the other composer had written other, and then the composer who actually was getting the credit for it had written none of the score. And this is a film. I won't say which, and I won't say who.
Yeah, don't want to throw anybody under a bus.
No, I'm not throwing anybody under the bus. So but it does happen. But I wrote every note of the music, and but that is the hard part. Writing the music is the hard part. Getting it approved. There are moments of like real exhilaration when you write music and you go, "Wow, that's really good." It's like, I'm really happy with this, and then you send it to them, and they're like, "Yeah, that's beautiful. We love."
You're
that.
your harshest critic.
Yeah.
So if you like it, then like.
So if I feel good about it, but that's not always true. Sometimes, look, a lot of music that composers for film, TV, and games, we write it, and then they go, okay, that's not quite right. And you get feedback, and then you rework it. This happens a lot. That's the process. But once you find the style, and once Bear McCreary, who's also co-composer and a good friend of mine, once we found the style, it went very smoothly.
That's wonderful. Well, now we've got just one more question for you. You've been part of some of gaming's greats, including Bioshock, like we talked about, the Middle-earth series, Dante's Inferno, and more. Looking back, can you tell us like just a moment that a memorable moment in your video game career due to your composition? Like just anything that just it's a memory that sticks with you of your time doing video game music.
Well, I remember like at a live performance in San Francisco at the GDC, and they just played some of my music, and they called me out onto the stage, and I was getting like this amazing like standing ovation. I felt like a rock star for a few moments there. That was really a beautiful moment where I went, wow, people really love my music.
Mm-hmm.
That was, so that was wonderful having that, getting that kind of a reaction. We write, composers we live lonely lives. We are by ourselves most of the time writing music. And so it's really, that's one of the cool things about recording with orchestras. Like you get out into the world and you have musicians surrounding you and they're playing, they're doing their best to bring your music to life. So that's really a lovely moment as well. I do love, I have to say, the week, this is not a moment, but the week recording the music for Forspoken, which was in Nashville, I was like on a high that week. I have to say, it was like everything about that week was like, I don't think I had a bad moment. Even the Nashville chicken was like amazing.
I'm from Tennessee. I used to live near Nashville, so I completely
Okay.
understand what you're talking about.
Well, it's if you like spicy food, of course. So it was that was a fantastic week recording the music. I do love recording, and so I've had many experiences, like when recording Dante's Inferno actually in London with the Philharmonia Orchestra. I remember the first cue, getting an Abbey Road. I'm at this famous iconic studio, getting up and lifting my baton, and then we're rehearsing the first cue, and I had some really difficult horn parts, and I had eight French horns, and it's like,
Wow.
and I'm like, and often French horns they're touchy, they chip notes and they make last. These guys were like, holy crap, this is amazing. It just sounded spectacular the first take, and I was saying, wow, this is going to be a fun one. That was a week too. That's
I'm
gonna be a fun
so
week.
excited. I'm gonna go back and try to find what you're talking about. Do you remember which song it was?
Ooh, I don't remember which
I'll
cue
have
that
to
was. That
dig.
was it was, but the horns were like, we had the four horns of the Philharmonia, which is like a professional school,
Mhm.
and then the first chair of like three or four other orchestras. So we
Wow.
had absolutely a uncompromisingly spectacular horn section, and they just nailed stuff. It was so much fun. And even at lunch, like the brass, there's an in-house restaurant at Abbey Road. It's kind of like a little cafeteria style restaurant, but they serve beer there, London Pride, I remember. And the brass were like drinking at lunch. And I'm going, how's that going to affect them after lunch? But they continue to play well. Strings were not drinking at lunch, but the brass were. Like, all right,
Sounds about right.
we would have a London Pride at the end of the day, so that's like a reward. Okay, we worked all day. Let's have a beer, a cold
Yeah.
one, and listen back to what we recorded that day. So that was fine. I could relax, but I'm not going to drink during the day. I can tell you when I'm recording an orchestra. Otherwise, I'm going to be not good, because you got to be really focused. Yeah, I'm going to be pretty limp, So yeah, you want to be focused. I mean, one beer doesn't, knock you
Yeah. Yeah.
unconscious. um, but I'm not going to drink beer. In any event, that was amazing having spectacular musicians, and of course, LA has that. So it's a great. I mean, look, if you love writing music and you love recording with live musicians, it's a great gig. It's a great job. It really is. So
Well, I appreciate you so much for taking time with us today. We've been speaking with Garry Schyman, currently working with Forspoken, but has done so many amazing things throughout his career so far. And I can't wait for everybody else to be able to hear this music. And I'm excited to hear the music in game. So thank you so much for being a part of this today for us.
my pleasure, Adam. Thanks for inviting me on.